better future.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am Fitzgerald H. Mendelsmith, back with another presentation on the Association of Ishtar, a setting of cosmic mystery and steampunk adventure. If you want to experience this universe for yourself, we are developing an RPG called Nightwatch, and you can follow it on Kickstarter so you won't miss the early birds. Follow us today and spread the word. Now, let's delve into today's topic, which I call the first Casket Girl. For those new here, realize this is the second part in a trilogy of videos, so we recommend you watch the history of Devil's Island first. In our previous lecture, we discussed the history of Devil's Island and how its penal colony became the French Empire's reverse engineering sweatshop. Today's lesson is about one of the topics you guys requested the most, the creation of the International Penal Legion and how they were deployed all across the world to destroy the aliens invading this world. That said, in order to do this topic justice and to respect your time, we cut it up in 2 parts to keep things digestible. Also, we included a lot more anecdotes this time. I hope you enjoyed this change in format, and as always, we are looking forward to your feedback in the comments. On a foggy day on the 7th of August, the small steamboat Anam Marie sailed through the restless waves, carrying supplies from Qian's mainland towards Devil's Harbor. In the distance, the crew could hear the ghostly howls of the island's caverns that gave Devil's Island its name. A low drone that shuddered across the surface like a never-receding storm gale. Peering through the soup-like fog, the captain, Roger Junket, noticed there were fewer lights in the town than usual. He didn't think much of it until he spotted a dark object drifting in the waters ahead. As the Anam Marie drew closer, it turned out to be an empty fishing canoe stuck on a reef. Although macabre, there was no reason for concern, and yet the demonic howling resonating through the subterranean caves vexed him more than usual. Suddenly, the Anam Marie lurched violently to the side. The crew struggled to stay on their feet, dodging the cargo sliding across the deck. Panicking, the captain left his cabin to find the cause of the incident. Then he did. Holding on to the doorway, he saw slimy fingers with needle-like nails clutching the railing. Just as he reached for his revolver, his man recoiled as a humanoid shape lifted itself across the side, contorting its serpentine body like a fish crawling onto land. As he nervously cocked his revolver, Captain Junket got blinded by the saucer-shaped eyes, glowing as brightly as any lantern. Throwing all caution to the wind, the helmsman turned the ship in a vain attempt to shake the creature off, tilting the already struggling boat further to its side. As the boat leaned closer to the water, the captain braced himself against the railing, while the beast used its webbed arms to lumber onto the deck. The beast's eyes projected light through the fog as it dragged itself across the deck. Clinging to a rope anchor, the captain clenched his revolver tightly as the monster spotted him. The blood in his veins chilled as the 2 glowing orbs closed in. Desperately, he raised his gun and squeezed the trigger. The smell of gunpowder spread across the deck. Without a sound, the creature recoiled. Spasmodically, it swung its tail, splashing on deck like a fish caught on dry land before finally folding itself over the side and sliding back into the water. As the splash resounded across the ship, the Anam Marie lurched violently, causing Junket to fire a shot by mistake as he tumbled across the floor. The scent of black powder lingered in the air as the crew lay stupefied on deck. Gathering his willpower, Junket rose to his feet and ordered the ship to return to Qian. Although they were leaving Devil's Island behind, when he closed his eyes, Young Cat still saw those glowing orbs in the darkness, scaring his soul like searchlights from hell. When Captain Young Cat returned on the 7th of August, a message was sent to the then governor, Jean-Baptiste Cadio. This event sent shockwaves to the colonial administration, who hurried to make contact with Devil's Island. On the 8th, the mainland still hadn't been able to make wireless contact, and on the 9th the lookouts reported that the lighthouse of Devil's Island had gone dark. The administration now had a serious problem. Cadio quickly ordered the creation of an expedition to discover what happened. Together with a retired harbor pilot, Jean Rivière, who was familiar with Devil's Harbor, a group of mercenaries and a garrison detachment headed for the isle. The boat was escorted by the Sion-constructed cruiser La Hero, the first cruiser of its kind. The cruiser remained at a safe distance as fog shrouded the reefs. After his return, Rivière made the following statement on what transpired next. I remember the calm on the water that day. It was as if the sea itself was afraid to upset the devil. Everyone was on edge. Even the steam engine sounded quieter than usual. It wasn't just the prospect of monsters hunting us. During our final approach, the piers were lifeless. No man or seagull in sight, just the devil's howl resounding in the distance like a bad omen. Even a lieutenant whispered orders as we were prepared to disembark. As we quickly made our way across the pier, the harbor's wooden buildings appeared frozen in time. Doors were left open, crates and personal belongings littered the street. The tavern, the brothel, the prison barracks, empty. Even the jungle was silent, leaving nothing but a devil's howl resounding between the structures. The lieutenant ordered the sailors to stay behind as he and his soldiers made their way to the jungle camp. I'm glad he did. As we waited by the boat, I heard horrendous shrieks, like flocks of dying crows coming from the jungle. It was followed by numerous shots. You could tell they didn't stand a chance. While the shrieks persisted, a final gunshot rung hollow from the woods. Bureaucrats, being what they are, reported the men were missing in action to cover up the fiasco. Governor Cadio, if he was nervous before, was now tearing his hair out. Without Devil's Island, the colony's entire business model was in danger. Also, its lighthouse was essential for shipping, but more importantly to him, his life. The local gangs and families didn't want any outside officials getting involved in their affairs. Although Kian was remote, they had many old-world connections that would get very upset if the authorities would take an interest in the colony's internal affairs. The local garrison, however, was confident that with the proper preparation and the use of technology available to them, they could invade Devil's Island and neutralize any opposition. They also had another important resource. Due to the unknown nature of the threat, instead of sending in his guards or prized mercenaries, the governor sent in his most expendable assets: the prisoners. Instead of merely taking random inmates, they were volunteers who were offered their freedom if they completed their mission. This was the unceremonious start of the Kian Penal Battalion. Time to turn back the clock for a moment. Penal battalions are a timeless concept that come in two flavors. The first are the battalions to discipline soldiers by making them do all the shitty jobs, from cleaning latrines to digging trenches and clearing minefields while under enemy fire. The second, and more controversial, that being military units comprised of prisoners pressed into service or court-martialed soldiers to make them perform the worst and deadliest jobs you can imagine. Overall, it's not a fun time being equipped with hand-me-down equipment and told to go wild during the next meatwave attack without any training to speak of. Of course, these are considered to be desperate measures, as you are still more likely to run out of men before the enemy runs out of bullets. That said, being comprised of scum of the earth not only makes them more expendable, Being criminals, they tend to have fewer scruples when performing missions regular troops might refuse, especially things of the war crime variety. Many an army found it helpful to let such undisciplined troops run amok among the civil population to discourage rebellion. This will become more important later. Back in September 1845, a couple of weeks have passed. Cyan's 1st Penal Battalion was raised and prepared to be sent to Devil's Harbor under the command of Captain Jean-Baptiste Richard, a seasoned commander from Qian who had experience with jungle fighting by dealing with Maroon bandits and Kalina tribesmen. His expeditionary force wasn't just comprised of prisoners, however. The local gangs and families sent in their volunteers and mercenaries to ensure their mutual interests. These men came from around the world, including Chinese, Kalina, and Africans. Fortunately, Richard spoke most of the languages that were common in the area. The first troops landed on the 17th of September. This vanguard would secure Devil's Harbor. The initial landings were successful, and supplies were delivered to fortify the fledgling outpost. The process was slow, however. Plagued by the miasma and suffocating heat, the men were unnerved by the alien noises coming from the jungle. Prisoners fled their work locations, screaming they saw monsters amid the foliage. Scouting parties inspected the perimeter, recovered human remains, confirming what was already known. They also came upon strange insects, and during the night, guards reported seeing lights floating between the trees. As the volunteers became increasingly aware of the alien predators awaiting them, morale plummeted, and locally born men spread tales of monsters and myths associated with the island. It was obvious to Captain Richard that sending in the troops unprotected was pointless. They needed a mobile weapon system that could protect the troops from whatever lurked in the jungle. Their first solution was the armored tractor. Tracked vehicles had been in development for quite some time, and they were used on Devil's Isle itself to drag cargo through the inhospitable terrain. The armored variants, however, were very new, as the suspension system had difficulty carrying the additional weight. However, Richard considered a current prototype good enough to serve as an armored personnel carrier. This vehicle was called the Leviathan, a prototype refitted with a periscope and a volley gun sponsor on either side of the vehicle that was powered by a primitive petrol engine. Its 12 crew members were fitted inside that thing like sardines, but they'd be safe while the Leviathan would deliver them to the temple area. In theory, at least. But the machine itself was considered to be an ineffective combat system. The guns might be good enough to scare creatures away, but something more capable was required. And it just so happened that, due to the nature of the male-filled prisons, female convicts were sent to the convent of Saint Lorraine on the nearby island of Saint Joseph, far away from prying eyes, where these women got the opportunity to volunteer as test pilots for this new breed of machine. And that brings us to the topic many of you were waiting for. The chassis de bataille, or battle frames, are quadrupedal automatons using some of the most advanced technology available to the colony, and potentially the world. Although their tactical benefit was questionable, the CBs were Governor Chadillot's pet project, something to impress the generals back home and secure his legacy as an innovator. And the women on St. Joseph would be more than suitable for the task. It was no secret that these machines and their pilots would play a significant role in the decades to come. But before we discuss the fairer sex and their role in the colonization of the overseas territories, let's pause for a moment. First of all, the illustrated book The Casket Girls is now available for sale on various websites, including our personal website on Gumroad. And yes, The Casket Girls will be playable in our upcoming RPG Nightwatch. Go follow it today. If you enjoy this series' original art and would like to see more, please consider supporting us on REAM. It's a platform for readers made by authors. You can follow me there for free, and get free stories every week, or become a member and gain instant access to all content including ebooks. On our higher tiers you can even get STLs and illustrations. Know that all our income goes to independent artists to create more awesome content for this growing universe. And with that said, let's continue. In the days of early colonization, places like Qian weren't known for the nice weather, sanitary conditions or friendly locals. But they made money. More importantly, the other guys couldn't exploit these occupied territories. Colonial politics are petty that way. Like buying a second runabout just to deny the other guy a parking space. Suffice to say, early colonization was a masculine affair. These areas needed to be policed and the surrounding waters patrolled. Prospectors, trappers and soldiers alike were not the most homely of people, making these early settlements rough places. Although they made the empires lots of money, they didn't create lasting settlements. It was decided these men, without responsibility or restraint, needed to be civilized. So, their respective home countries would have to incentivize the other sex to move to the colonies. The policy of sending women overseas can be traced back to the Spanish colonization. During the 16th and 17th century, European women were in high demand in places like New France, Saint Orleans and French Guinea. Therefore, King Louis XIV sponsored women aged 16 to 25 to leave for the New World. Coincidentally, these women brought royally sponsored dowry chests, hence they were called the King's Daughters, La Fille de Roi. By the 18th century, female colonists didn't get such royal treatment. The colonies became a way to do away with undesirables. Male prisoners were sent to the deadliest corners of the French Empire to expand existing settlements and gather resources. And to provide for these ex-cons, undesirable women were sent after them. Between 1700 and 1750, the streets of Paris were being raked for prostitutes to send them off to mental hospitals. A practice that ceased after the 1750s due to public backlash. During those years, many of these women would not survive the journey. Those that did would often leave the ships with bloodshot eyes, invoking the image of vampires rising from their caskets. Although this became part of New Orleans folklore about vampires, it's likely not the origin of the slang Casket Girl. The Casket Girls, or filles à la cassette, were known for carrying many of their belongings in cassette cases called caskets, which got anglicized to casket. In Cuba, a ship known for delivering the women was Le Pelican, hence these women were known as Pelican Girls. Another possible explanation for the name is that many of the female convicts had the option to go to Qian to marry instead of going to prison, but rather than starting families, they would go into a business for themselves, causing an outbreak of syphilis among the population. Probably unrelated to the name, but I still thought it was funny. There is more I could get into, but we're running long as it is. Instead, we'll go back to 1840s Qian. At the time, the Saint Laurent convent was working on their second chassis de bataille prototype, the CB2, a bulky machine armed with two self-reloading volley guns created by Qian's state-owned arsenal called the Qian Mitrailleuse that fired grape-shot rounds in rapid succession. Of course, this vehicle needed a pilot, and her name was Jean Paris. Little is known about her. According to Qian's historians, she was born in the colony and married one of the project engineers, but most likely she was just one of the women at the convent deported from France under a different name. Regardless, Jean would be one of the first Casket Girls on record to take one of these automatons into a mission. And that automaton had a name. Avant-Garde. It is September 14th, 1845. Operation Vert has begun. As the 12 men were crammed inside Leviathan's cabin like sardines, Avant-Garde was Leviathan's designated escort. Their orders were simple: penetrate the jungle until they stirred the hornet's nest. From there they could make a fighting retreat, supported by La Hero's 152 and 57mm naval guns. As the two vehicles left the confines of Devil's Harbor, the Leviathan crossed foliage and trees under its tracks to clear the way for future advances, while Avant-Garde followed in its wake. Despite the engines roaring under the strain, the tractor made good headway through the jungle, but all was not well. Both Paris and the tractor crew were overheating inside their poorly ventilated vehicles. They pushed on regardless into the wet hell that was the jungles of Devil's Island. One of Leviathan's crew described what happened next.
The cabin stank of sweat and petrol as 12 of us sat cooked up in Leviathan's belly. At least the roaring of her engines drowned out the howls of the fiendish cries that tormented us back at camp. That said, the interior had all the appeal of a hovel made of spare plates that rattled and vibrated like a bag of empty tin cans. I'd stood at the periscope while two comrades manned the sponsors on either sides of the machine. Despite wrapping a shirt around my head, sweat ran down my brow as I looked through the periscope viewfinders to scan the fork's surface for any obstacles. But there was this strange shimmer, making it almost impossible to see what lurked beneath. Every so often the Leviathan would crawl to a near standstill as he collided with another obstacle to be crushed beneath its treads. Except the biggest trees, that we would give a wide berth. My only job was to tell the boys to brace themselves, as we were about to crush another hurdle. As we reached a clearing amidst the bush, I finally saw the temple stop rising above the canopy at the heart of the island. My euphoria faded, however, when I became aware of our location: an abandoned lumber camp. The dark silhouettes of torn tents stood amidst the fog as ghostly reminders of what had transpired. Our journey became uneventful at that point as we waited for Leviathans to reach the other side, but I didn't have the heart to tell them what I had seen. Shreds of thick blood-stained canvas, torn, hung from broken frames as a testament to what was waiting for us. Then I noticed movement in the bush. Beyond the stoop-like fog, something was disturbing the leaves among the tree line. As I followed its movement with the periscope, the creatures pushed trees aside as it reached the jungle's edge. I clenched the handles of the periscope when a 4-meter-tall ape creature emerged from the bush, covered in intertwined strands of wool, hanging down to its knees. We gritted our teeth as the beast's baboonish snout appeared, letting out a high-pitched shriek that cut through the Leviathan's clanking like the devil's bullhorn. At the moment we knew we had stirred the hornet's nest. The Leviathan went into reverse as the monster pounded the ground with its fist in a fury I'd ever seen. Once at the right angle, the left sponsor opened fire in response. I covered my ears as the cabin filled with smoke and bullet casings bounced around. Alas, the volley gun only angered the beast, which seemed unfazed by our bullets as it rushed toward us. As I looked through the periscope, I saw the creature charging us across the field, crushing all obstacles in its path. We toppled off our seats as the monster ran into the side and tore the gun barrel from its sponsor with ease. It then attempted to take its way through the gun port in vain. It then climbed on top. I recalled when the viewfinder got pulled out of my hands as it got torn out of the periscope. But still, the beast was not satisfied. We got tossed from side to side as the beast stamped its feet on the roof in frustration, and all what we could do was either wait for it to go away or get inside. That's when we heard the rattling of Avant-Garde's guns. The blinding machine was peppering our vehicle with grape shot, but at least the beast jumped off the roof. We held our breath as we heard the creature pace around our machine, growling and wheezing as he did. The beast seemed to be making a run for it, while Avant-Garde was firing her weapons without pause. As the crew attempted to get the motor started again, the commander ordered me to look outside. As I raised my head from the roof hatch, the haze of gun smoke and petrol stung my eyes. But there was the aping, galloping through the park while smouldering like a wet campfire. I could see the beast shedding its fur as it charged into the hail of bullets, but it held course, galloping faster and faster until it finally recalled after getting struck in the base and dropped to the ground. Silence enveloped the field as smoke rose from its cadaver as it lay there in front of the automaton that condensed the fog surrounding it. That's when Avant-Garde's canopy opened. The pilot threw her mask away as she stuck her head out, gasping for air. Clad in nothing but sweat-soaked undergarments sticking to her skin, she lay folded over the cabin's ledge like a wet towel. Clueless on what to do, I called out to her. I'll never forget those eyes sunken in that red face peering back at me like a bloated corpse crawling from its casket. That's when I saw those eyes were not the suffering of some animal, but something desperate, only foreseeing a future of pain and suffering for a purpose it did not know or understand.
And with that anecdote, we'll end this lecture. Alborough's skepticism is informed by his age, experience, and police policy. Having walked the streets of Dover for as long as he has, he witnessed how modernity changed his... Next time we'll dive more into the penal battalion's actions and their attempts to reclaim Devil's Island and what they learned from this experience. Please let me know your thoughts on this format. Would you like more stories to be included in these future videos? And as always, I'm looking forward to your reactions in the comments. And if you want to get involved in developing this world, partake in playtesting or perform a voice in the videos, join us on Discord. I would also like to take a moment to thank all the artists who have worked on these videos over the year that we've been producing this series. With every video we have more original art to share with you and bring this world to life. Go check out their websites, and if you need some art of your own, go commission these guys. And with that, class dismissed.